The clock already. Time flies.
Okay, are we good to go on your end?
Please.
Are we good to go on your end? Do you want me to kick it
Ready
off?
to go on my end, you want me to hit?
Sure.
Subtitles?
They're there, it should be.
No.
Good to go, Marissa?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. We are going to kick this off. My name is Tristan Haas, the chair of this committee, the Budget Education and City Services Committee. And we are calling our February meeting to order, despite the date. We have two items on the agenda for this evening. The first is going to be a review of agency responses to our budget requests and our consideration of if we want to put together a response to that executive budget. So in the past, we've put together a letter, obviously thanking them for the items that they do support, and then providing feedback and extra support for items that they decline to support. And that would be a letter if we deem it appropriate. The second will be a presentation from our representatives from the AFL-CIO covering union labor, specifically as it relates to economic development and construction safety. So this is very pertinent given all of the development going on and proposed changes to zoning in the future. That will not be an action item, that will solely be for our educational purposes. And we will have a representative speaking who's not here yet. So we're going to tackle the preliminary executive budget first. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll just walk through these initial responses that we have from city agencies. And let's see. Let's zoom in. For those who have their computers, I sent this across earlier today and last weekend. We'll just walk through and would like to, once we finish walking through, hear your thoughts on if you would be supportive of a letter and what you'd want it to focus on. And then we can, I think we probably will be able to bring this to exec because we had board support for the requests as a whole, as well as the statement for district needs. So I don't think we'd have to go to full board for a letter, but we can confirm that. So this first request was for a mobile command center vehicle for Times Square. The agency said that we should contact them directly and provide more information, and they can't accommodate at this time. And so there'll be different categories for these requests. Some will be them saying they need more information, either via direct contact or via resolutions from the community board. Some of them will say that they do support these requests and they can accommodate. Some will say that they support them, but they can't accommodate and to resubmit in the future. So that would be an example where, we in the board office could engage directly with the agency and provide more information. The second item pertains to renovating the Andrew Heiskell Braille and Talking Book Library, where the agency said they support it, but they can't accommodate it at this time, given the need for additional city capital. They just acknowledge that these were high priority items for the New York Public Library. The next was a request to install additional real-time passenger information signs throughout CB5. So this was a positive response where that they will support it and they can accommodate it. And they provided some information on the current amount of signs that have been installed throughout Manhattan and their plans underway to install more. Go ahead, Yaron.
I was just
And I'll
gonna,
say,
is,
as we go, feel free to raise questions or comments as we go through.
I was just gonna say, is the plan to go through all 75 requests one by one and sort of read into the record what is happening? I mean, I don't know, we have this doc. I'm just wondering if that's what we need to do, or is that the plan?
That is the plan right now. I don't know if I found a chance, or we could, if you guys had a chance to review, we could just jump right to deciding if we want to write a letter and what we can focus on. So maybe the question for you guys, like, have you got a chance to review the responses? Seeing a couple nods,
Yeah.
some.
I mean, I guess my thought is there are sort of categories, as you said, there are categories of responses, right?
Mhm.
And for I guess my question is historically, because I haven't been on this committee, are the responses that say, please get in touch with the agency promptly for more information? What is the process for that, and what will that yield realistically?
Yeah,
'Cause I would say most of the does not support and can't accommodate are, please get in touch with us.
mhm. Yeah, so I think in some cases they'll be true, like they need more information, because sometimes the request could be at too high a level or not specific enough, and so they do want direct engagement. I think sometimes, perhaps in the past, they may be very loose with providing that in response. I myself have not been the chair of this committee when we've done that engagement. Marisa, I don't know if you want to speak to how successful such engagement has been in the past.
I mean, I think what I would like to point out is, kudos to OMB. The district managers in Manhattan anyway have been advocating and working with OMB and city planning for the last couple of years to get them to give us actual responses. And so this is much better than it's been in the past. Some of the responses are still frustrating, but they are doing much better in how they are responding. And so I think just to keep this moving along, I think you decide as a committee, but I think going ahead and then responding to their response would be a good thing to do.
Mhm.
Just to, we asked something of them, they provided it, now they're asking something of us, and perhaps we should provide it back.
Yeah.
And so, some of it is asking specific committees to take action on a request for them to move forward. Some of it is just that they need more information, and we could provide that information through the office to those agencies. Some of it I don't understand, like the fire department request, that was a request that came from the fire department
Mhm.
in our budget meeting. So I don't know why suddenly the agency doesn't support it. Maybe a fire department member spoke out of turn or something like that, but that's an odd one to me. But otherwise, they're doing a much better job than they have in the past.
And
Is
just
that
to get,
helpful at all?
yeah, just to give an example of like how we respond in the past, what you see before you is an example of the letter from last year, where we kind of reiterated the key principles from the statement of district needs. And then for each of the agencies, we talked about requests that they said they would fulfill, thanking them for that engagement, and then hauled out like key priorities that were not met or that would require some additional information. So this would be something to the line of what Marisa was talking about, like just continuing the engagement.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess for the, what I was asking is, I think that's very helpful, Marisa. I think there's a whole category of please get in touch with this agency for more information. I guess I was questioning, how could we write a letter providing more information when we don't know the information they're asking? Like that's sort of what I'm wondering. Like, what is the so the fire department's like, please get in touch for more information. What would we even say in our letter? Because we don't know what they're asking, right? Is that right? Or am I misunderstanding
Yeah,
that?
fine, Marissa.
I mean, just to clarify, there's two different things going on.
Okay,
The board's response to the mayor's preliminary budget is not necessarily the response to these individual budget requests.
okay.
They're two different things. So, you know, the office with the committee or chairs of various committees can get back to the agencies to fulfill the request to get more information or do some follow-up. The budget response letter is really to the mayor's preliminary budget. If in his preliminary budget, you think he's responded to some of the housing requests, let's say, or social service requests or so, then you could comment on that. But that's not the place to deal with these individual budget responses.
Got it. That's super, super helpful. Okay, so then I would recommend, Tristan, that we don't necessarily need to go
Yeah.
line by line. Sorry,
Okay,
sorry
so
about
I'm,
that.
no.
I
That's a
just
big
want a
fella.
clarifying question.
Sure, sure.
I think we stole each
By all
other's
means.
language.
Go ahead.
The ones that are supported appear to also say remove request. So is that like internal language by OMB to themselves to say, check it off, we support it? It doesn't have to be on a lit, like what's the remove request? Who's that to?
I'm not
guess.
I'm not
Okay.
entirely sure, to be honest with you. I read it as, don't put this on the list next year. I
Okay,
mean,
I just didn't know if it was like them talking to themselves saying, okay, we got that one.
yeah, right.
Or
I'm not sure.
don't ask us again
I'm
next
gonna
year.
follow up. I'm gonna
Okay.
follow up on that. This is, you know, we just got this like today.
Yeah.
I'll follow up with them on that. Although there's times when they say that, and then when you read the explanation, they just say, we feel like we do that already. And I feel like the board has said, no, we don't feel like you're doing it enough. So I'm not sure that I would necessarily accept if it's to say, don't put this on the list next year, we do it already, that may or may not be true.
Right.
I think that's a
Okay.
judgment.
Understood. Thank you. Thanks, Tristan.
No.
Yeah, separate question. The letter that we would write, pension to support or one of these things, does it go to the mayor's office or does it go to the responsible agency?
So this letter would go to the mayor's office.
Got it. Okay. Is there any need then to comment on the ones where the agency supports and can accommodate them?
I don't think so. I don't think we would need to cover that in the letter.
Presumably those ones are already
Mhm.
taken care of.
Yeah,
Presumably, again, I feel like
Presumably.
sometimes they say it's taken care of and you may not feel like it's actually really taken care of.
and Marissa, do you know, I know you're looking into like the timing of the response to the mayor.
I think we have till the middle of February, so after a full board, but I don't think it can go until March.
Yeah, okay. So what I have here is this summary. So candidly, I was looking at the agency responses as well to guide the responses that we were writing this letter. So I was not looking at this summary document. So I have this pulled up now. We can go through some of the key focus areas here.
Wait, which document?
No. I just found this online. So this is a little bit of a mea culpa. Share this. I just shared that via email for those with electronic information. Or with their computers here. But it looks like,
Was anything sent out for this meeting? Cause I received nothing.
we did
Yeah.
send out
Oh,
information.
okay.
Mhm.
I think you might have my old email address. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I will,
Let's,
Yeah,
let's
okay.
touch base
Mhm.
afterwards.
Found that.
So in terms of some key priorities being emphasized here, a lot of focus on asylum seeker costs. And some information on some savings over the next 2 years, an expectation to reduce some of that. Some information on national economic indicators for the future. Job growth over the past few years and expectations for the future. As well as some concerns for the future related to real estate, in light of the high interest rates, housing market activity, stubborn commercial office vacancies, and the impact of incoming federal administration's actions that could impact trade, immigration, regulatory regime, and grant funding, some of which we're already seeing this week. And there we go. So in terms of their preliminary budget right now, they have it balanced at 114.5 billion, closing the budget gap with a combination of new revenue, savings, and a prepayment from this year's budget into next year's. We're expecting revisions for tax revenue up for over the rest of this year and to next year relative to the previous financial plan provided. I'm expecting a growth in business taxes and expecting subdued growth in property taxes.
Did you say subdued growth? or-
Yeah, so just like not increase, so expecting it to stay stagnant. And that's a material portion of the city budget. There's some content on savings that have been secured over 2 years. Including related to pension costs and the labor reserve. So they have some information on how they're filling certain gaps for related to shelters, rental assistance, the public school nurses, and supportive housing. They've got some information on budget being allocated to fill certain federal and state funding mandates, including the MTA, foster parents, charter schools, and early intervention programs. Some information on the budget reserves, so at a record high level, which is great. Then turning to homelessness, so it has some details on efforts underway to get homeless New Yorkers more support, including safe haven beds, 24/7 citywide street subway outreach, pilot programs that provide homeless New Yorkers with mental illness, psychiatric and substance abuse treatment and temporary housing, additional runaway homeless youth shelter beds, and pilot programs for soon-to-be parents who are applying for shelter with rental assistance programs. Then they got some information on infrastructure upgrades at certain hospital units, enhancing Department of Correction recruiting efforts, bolstering security and safety for staff and individuals in Department of Correction facilities. Adding additional daylight intersection parking fixtures, so that's something that we actually talked about on this community board, requested additional funding for. Additional funding for swim safety programming. some details on the city of Yes for housing opportunity. And then some information on a tax proposal to eliminate the personal income tax for certain working class families. Funding for tenant protection programs, funding for PEU, which honestly, I'm not sure what that stands for. So a program that refers vacant apartments to the rental subsidy programs. Expanding capacity for initiatives that help fathers strengthen relationships with their children. So administrative support for certain job and employment programs and hiring initiatives, pre-apprentice initiatives. Expanding the Department of Parks and Rec, staffing and cleaning 2 additional parks. Hiring additional staff to help reduce the rat population in a large number of tree beds. Important issue for this administration. Opening additional schoolyards for use as public playgrounds. Creating additional cultural institution groups. Funding for programming and staff, including recreation specialists and lifeguards in Flatbush. Continuing support for certain summer rising academic and enrichment programs. Supporting certain initiatives to engage students who are underperforming and to help them achieve their high school graduations. Expanding the Pathways program to provide career readiness opportunities. Some additional youth programming and support. Financial and education resource provision in schools, focus on financial education. And then some information on a 10-year capital strategy to improve infrastructure. And some more details on that strategy. And then some granular details on how on the revenue gap, how it's changed and been forecast for the future. Including some details on the asylum seekers plan. So there's a lot there that we covered in either specific requests or the statement of district needs. Some stuff we didn't. And so I think it's really up to us if we think it would be helpful to write a response kind of lauding the programs that he's supporting that we agree with, and perhaps pointing attention to certain initiatives that he didn't specifically cover, but that we might have emphasized in our statement of district needs. So, does anyone have any thoughts on his proposal? Be our feedback, if any, and whether to write a letter in response? Feel free to raise your hand. Go ahead, Joe.
We mentioned public realm improvements in our budget request, because I didn't see that much through that slideshow. Yes. The long-standing thing in CP5 are access to spaces.
Sure. We'll call some attention to those requests,
Right.
which I think we did.
Or bathrooms were denied.
So bathrooms, public realm. Anything else that you guys didn't see? Wait, this team?
This is showing my own lack of awareness. So did we end up putting in a line item about bike enforcement stuff?
I'd have,
Because I didn't notice that in any of the commentary. And I know that's like one of these topics that comes up every. But I can't recall if we didn't have a place for it, because it's not,
based on the feedback.
I couldn't.
I think we did just asking for increased staffing for all the police precincts because they're the
Oh,
ones
that
that
was
do
the mechanism.
the.
I couldn't remember the mechanism of asking for it.
Mhm. Yeah, we did request additional traffic and enforcement agents to enforce bike and traffic related items,
Mhm.
which the agency did not support and can't accommodate. So we could call that out as
I
well
don't
in
know,
the
it's just
letter.
one that came to mind,
Sure.
if other people agree with it.
Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, just as, I mean, this problem is just the broad stroke, so it's not a lot of detail.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. I'm not sure what to respond with exactly.
Well, there is some overlap between some of the initiatives and our requests, so I think in general, we can just call out those like across the board. I can go through and go, one to one and see which ones those are and say like, lot.
I mean, like the
Thanks for doing
the
Yeah.
homelessness and the parks are mentioned, but like. They mentioned spending a lot of money on transportation, but they didn't say, like with transit. Any improvements with
Yeah,
that.
they just kind of give like a.
And just
a
talked
number.
about daylighting intersections. And
Yeah.
that was it.
You're on, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think sort of how to move forward. So it sounds like if we were to do a letter, the task would be someone would have to go through the preliminary budget. I think probably the more detailed version and not this. See where it maps to what we requested and then say, okay, these things are great. And then there would be another section of here are some other things that we'd really like you to consider. I guess my question is, how would we as a committee determine what goes in that section? We could put everything in there that isn't in the preliminary budget. We could pick the top 5 things based on our previous prioritization in each category. Remember how we like picked the biggest thing in each bucket? I mean, I guess it just gets unwieldy if we're just if it's like we want to, if it's like a 70-page letter of here are all of the things you forgot, and it's literally one by one by one the things that we asked for. I mean, but maybe that's appropriate.
Yeah, and looking, last year at least, we made mention to like our top budget requests, priorities wise. Go ahead, Marisa.
Are you good? Do you need any?
No, we're good.
Questions?
Good. Thank you. So yeah, I think like going through with that lens would be helpful, especially the items that we called out specifically in the statement of district needs could be another way to guide those prioritizations, where our board's already on the record, and so we can just continue to assert those priorities.
We have 3 spots where we request hiring additional uniformed officers. And all 3 were labeled do not support and cannot accommodate. And I'm just curious, I would think the NYPD would ask for more money every year. I mean, it's interesting to me that they were like, no, we're good.
Yeah.
But just to clarify on that, is that Kevin who was asking?
It was,
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
So just again, Tristan, like procedurally, but this letter is not to the NYPD. This
Yeah.
letter is to the mayor. And if the mayor also said, I want more uniformed officers, we say great. And if the mayor said, I don't care about that, then we say, but we want you to. But the actual response for the NYPD is irrelevant for this exercise. Is that correct?
Correct, like this is
Yeah.
going to the mayor, but we
Yeah,
could call that
sorry.
out, and so like, if
Yeah, I
we're
guess so.
seeing incongruencies between like what we're seeing from the agencies and like what we're
Yeah.
seeing in the mayor's.
I mean, when I
plan.
think about just at a high level, like what is our district, you know, we're very unique in that we're the primary business and entertainment district in the whole city, so we're kind of the economic engine of the city, so.
Mhm.
Crime is obviously a big priority, or should be, so I went right to the NYPD things, and I guess I was just calling that out. You're right, you're on, we're not gonna send the NYPD a letter, but I just thought it was interesting that that would be their response.
Yeah,
But
no, it's a totally legitimate question. Tristan, can we look back, can we go back to what the mayor said about public safety, though?
We can. Yeah, so just general improvement of safety for motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists, but that's talking about daylight intersection. Very light, honestly, and safety.
Well, maybe search NYPD and not safety.
They have a high level allocation in the capital strategy for Department of Corrections, courts, and NYPD lumps together.
Right?
the budget, I mean,
That's
the
it,
budget,
that's the only mention of NYPD.
Yeah,
yeah,
pretty light.
I mean, the forecast is. You know, aggregated at a very high level, like they just aggregate all the salaries together,
Mhm.
there's no like FDNY versus NYPD or et cetera. Or DOT.
Okay,
We have a letter from last year that we sent.
yep, have that. So in the original email that I sent last weekend, it's there, but I also have it right here on the screen now.
Oh, yeah.
So we just at a high level, kind of community board, our board, or general concerns, kind of reiterating the items in the statement of district needs. And then reiterating certain of the key asks for each of the agencies here. Any other thoughts? So I'm hearing, a letter addressing the points covered in the preliminary budget that we supported. And then calling out the key priorities that were detailed in the statement of district needs, but not sufficiently covered in his preliminary budget, or at least in detail. Some type of letter that addresses that. Does that sound reasonable? Seeing some nods. Okay, so it's due in mid-Feb, so we'll have to do it this cycle. Okay. So, well, it's a letter, but why don't we vote on it anyway? Is there a motion to approve such a letter?
I move.
Okay. Is
Committee
there a
ran
second? All right,
I'll second.
We're voting just to send a letter, but we don't
Yeah.
have a letter yet.
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
we don't have a letter, yeah. Okay, Mohit,
Yes.
Morris. Yes. Julie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Mike Greeley,
Yes.
Gerard,
Yes.
Mark Hirsch here. Mike Kabak,
Yes.
Isabel Marks,
Yes.
you're on.
Yeah,
Charles. Charles, you are still muted. Okay, we'll come back to you. Tiffany,
I'm a yes. Sorry about that.
Alright.
I'm using my phone. Sorry about that. I'm a yes.
okay. Tiffany. Yes. Okay, Tiffany, let us know if you can connect. Yoden,
Yes.
Justine,
Yes.
and then I am a yes. Thank you all. I'll go ahead and like draft up a letter and share that with everyone and then in a Google Doc and folks can review and provide feedback. And then we'll bring that to exec. And again, I think we can take that to exec action, not the full board, but if we deem full board appropriate, we'll include it in the package for this month.
Yeah, and not necessarily, I mean, expediency obviously isn't necessarily the goal, but it might be easiest just to take last year's letter now that
For
I'm
sure.
actually bothering to look at it, sorry. And just kind of like see what's different
Yeah.
from this year versus last year, because most of these issues are the same.
Mhm,
You know, maybe the migrant crisis is a little bit less of an issue than it was last year,
mhm.
et cetera.
For sure. Yeah, we'll try to keep it relatively in line with last year.
Yeah.
Charles, I see your hand up. Do you have a question or comment about any of that?
We'll get his vote.
No, we got it. Okay, so with that, we'll go to the second item on today's agenda, which is a presentation from the AFL-CIO. And Eric, I see you on the Zoom. Are you able to unmute yourself and speak? And if you can, the floor is yours.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. That must be Tristan, and I apologize. My connection is a bit shaky. I'm not very far away. From your office, I imagine, at the CUNY Graduate Center, which is that in Community Board 5? I believe so, right? Just on the border?
Yeah, indeed.
No.
Okay. Well, it's great to be here in Community Board 5, and it's great I'm sorry I wasn't able to join in person, but great to be with you all digitally. I think we don't have too much time, but I see there's maybe not that many of us in the room. Do we have time to do a quick, very brief round of introductions? So I know maybe what folks might be most interested in hearing? Or would you like me to just jump right in?
We actually have a good amount of people in the room. You just can't really tell with the camera. But I think we've got like 9 people in the
Okay.
room. Maybe we'll just
Okay.
spend introductions on our end, because we do have folks online. But I think, I don't know if you go to a lot of these community board meetings, Eric, but we're just citizens of the district. We don't necessarily have a strong background in labor policy, or land use policy altogether. So I think the more information you can give us as background, the better. This is the last item on the agenda for the evening, so don't feel like you have to rush it. Take all the time you need, and especially are interested in your insights on labor policy as it relates to the plans for zoning changes in the future and increased development and all those considerations.
Absolutely. Well, I'll just jump right in then. My name is Eric Foreman. I'm with the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust. We are a labor-owned mutual fund. The investors in the fund are union pension funds. And the mission of the trust, is to create good union jobs and to build affordable housing. The trust has origins in the 1960s in a conversation between MLK and the president of the AFL-CIO at the time, George Meany. By the way, the AFL-CIO, for folks who maybe aren't too involved in labor movement, that's the umbrella of labor unions, almost all labor unions in the United States, which has federal, state, and city level affiliates. And so I work with it's one of its capital one of the organizations that manages labor's capital in order to achieve the social.
Eric, real quick, do you mind just turning your camera off? Maybe it'll help your connection a little bit. You're just a little fuzzy on the audio. But go ahead, please. Eric, I see that you're still in the room. Can you speak? Oh, perfect. There
yes, I was muted there. I'm going to switch to just one moment. Apologies.
Eric Foreman.
There we go. Can everyone hear me?
Perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, so the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust is a mutual fund that's owned by union pension funds and public sector pension funds. If anyone here is a teacher in New York City, for example, or works in the public sector, it's likely that some tiny fraction of your pension dollars are invested in HIT. What HIT does is it seeks out projects that can achieve, you could call it a double or triple bottom line. One is to create high quality jobs with high quality union jobs. The other is to build affordable housing. HIT has invested over $2 billion in projects in New York City in the last 20, 30 years, creating in new construction and rehab. We're actually just finishing up a project on 311 West 42nd Street. Is that in Community Board 5? I took a look at the map.
It's a little west, yeah.
A little west, okay. I will say the challenge for us is that, and this is probably no surprise to folks here, that given the choice, most developers, as private companies are wont to do, many developers will seek to pay bottom dollar. And on job sites, often, I'll just be really blunt because life is short, violate labor law. There was a horrible tragedy on 34th Street or near there a few weeks ago. A construction worker was killed on the job. This is the reality of what happens when you are not employing a workforce that may have had access to training and may not be operating safely. Those are reasons why workers join and organize unions, is for safer workplaces and compensation that allows you to live in New York City. So we work closely with the unions in New York to try to create more union-built affordable housing. I was asked to speak a little bit about 45X. Are folks familiar with the labor standards baked into 45X?
Probably not, Eric.
Okay. Am I able to screen share?
Yep, go for it.
So 45X, I think folks here are probably aware that the real estate industry in New York City spends quite a lot of time, effort, and money lobbying for tax breaks for their project in exchange for, frankly, pretty minimal affordability standards, 20, 25%, depends on the program, and pushes back very hard against upholding labor standards on those projects. In the construction industry and a few other industries, there's something called prevailing wage. Are folks familiar with prevailing wage?
Yep,
Everyone?
I think
Okay.
a lot of nods here.
Okay. So this is essentially a wage rate set for the industry based on union contracts in the industry that have been bargained over, decades in many cases, that provide workers with a living wage, with access to benefits, retirement security, and also require a skilled and trained workforce, workers who've been through an apprenticeship program to learn the trade. The real estate industry has pushed back hard against, in many cases, against prevailing wage on projects. In the case of 45X, I'll just screen share here briefly. What's applicable to projects in your district, this is just from the city website in 45X, is that you are in Zone A. And so the construction work on in Zone A on projects at least 150 units is subject to these sections of state labor law, which basically is prevailing wage. And it says not and, but, and that word but is doing a lot of lifting in that sentence, must offer a minimum wage that is the lesser of $72.45 an hour or 65% of the greatest prevailing wage. And so in this deal, developers have gotten a lower wage standard than would be common on projects that receive substantial public dollars. I will add that New York State is actually, I will almost say, close to an anomaly in states where there is a government in office that is a Democratic government, in that we have very, very minimal standards for labor protections on publicly funded housing development. And so in other states, for example, in Minnesota, or even in New Jersey, projects that receive support, city and state support of a certain threshold of any kind often have to pay prevailing wage. What happens when you don't have these protections in place is that, and this is hopefully no secret to folks here, there's quite a lot of work being done on New York City construction sites by workers who are paid not just minimum wage, but sub-minimum wages, cash in hand, off the books, no insurance. There's a saying in the construction industry on some of these sites, if you fall off a ladder, you get fired on the way down. These are things that should not be happening in a civilized society. And so the labor movement in the construction industry, and like many others, exists to protect workers. Many developers will say that, you know, we can't afford to pay prevailing wage, but we find that this is simply not true. You know, we finance projects that are done with 100% union labor, and we're finishing one up on 42nd Street. If you can do it on 42nd Street, pretty sure you can do it just about anywhere. So we're a resource for questions. I think, is Penn South, the Penn South Co-op is not quite in your district, is it?
No.
Okay. There's also a long legacy of labor in New York City and New York State building limited equity co-ops. Limited equity co-ops are the backbone of the city's housing supply in the form of the Mitchell Llamas. We work with our coalition partners to try to bring that model back. We obviously have a housing crisis. So I think maybe I'll pause there. I think something that we're concerned about is that as these rezonings go forward and as construction takes off, you know, what can we do to make sure that this is work that creates good family sustaining jobs on safe work sites and stimulates our economy by allowing workers to make enough money to live in New York City. Yeah, so I'll maybe pause there for questions, but that's the high level of what HIT does. Is we invest union pension capital in projects that are done 100% union, and we've done that successfully across the country for the last 50 years.
Thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any questions? And if you're attending online, you could raise your hand and I can call on you. Go ahead, Joey.
So what's the project 42nd Street and why did it have union prevailing wage? Was it like a senior housing project or?
It was an 80-20. The site was owned by the Service Employees Union. And so they, just because those are their values, they wanted the work to be done union. Yeah. So where there's a will, there's a way is maybe the message.
Where did you say it was?
311 West 42nd Street. I can actually put a link in the chat. It's called the Ellery.
Follow-up questions, what are the affordable housing projects that you've worked on and how did it pencil out for those projects?
We've worked on quite a few. The Ellery has 20% affordable. Let me see if I can pull up one of our reports about all of our work in New York City. Just one moment. So I'll just screen share here. So here are a few highlights. Since 1984, HIT has done 79 projects in the New York City area, invested $2.1 billion, created or preserved 45,000 units. 91% of those are affordable. This has generated a lot of tax revenue. This is notable because when workers are paid off the books, you're not collecting tax revenue because no one's paying payroll tax. You are paying for the bill when workers have to go to the hospital and don't have health insurance. So this is notable. The Ellery, like I mentioned, this is actually just wrapping up. It's on 42nd Street, Betances residence in the Bronx, 152 unit, all affordable. Many of the federal subsidies require prevailing wage. So often if it's senior housing, which receives federal project-based vouchers, those will be prevailing wage, which is pretty much equivalent to the union wages. Hunters Point South, 1490 Southern Boulevard, Family Health Center is built by one of our affiliate organizations that uses New Market tax credits. And here's some highlights on this list. So 57th Street in Manhattan, Penn South Cooperative in Manhattan. So we've done a lot and would love to do more. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, who developed this project?
Which one, the Ellery?
Yeah.
Good question. I will have to look that up. I'm relatively new to HIT. I joined full time in August last year, so I don't always have all the developer names committed to memory.
Like, what's the? This is just informational. Like, there's
So-
no action. I didn't know if there-
Oh, okay, that was my question. But how can we be helpful, Eric? What is it that you would like CB5 to do or consider in our work?
Well, I think you are the first stop often for developers who are looking for rezonings. And so, I think maybe I think you're already doing a lot of great work, but I think there's been a move in the last 50 to 60 years in this country to think more holistically about development, not just about how many units do we build or what kind of revenue it generates or how many jobs it creates, but what is the quality of the affordability and what are the quality of the jobs that are being created? And I think the more of us who take a more holistic view of how does development not just create housing, but create good jobs and create substantial affordable housing, the better. Yeah. And I think that what we've seen is that developers respond. I mean, they will ultimately give people what they want. And so if we're saying we want it to be done union and we want affordable housing, then, you have a lever of power in your hands that they have to consider. I would also say if you're interested, I'd love to, I work with part of the labor movement that does the finance. I'd also, if you want to learn more about the labor standards issues, I'd love to connect you with the building trades unions, and I'm sure they'd be happy to bring somebody to share, why they do what they do. They fight very hard to try to bring more workers under the protection of a union. And I think they could speak to that in a lot more detail if that's interesting.
Eric, I'm just curious, do you guys often do sole financing or do you partner with a more traditional commercial real estate financer? Like a JV?
We work together with other investors on most projects. We work with mortgage bankers. I mean, HIT will finance everything from, we recently started providing pre-construction finance, which is often the most difficult part of the capital stack to get. We do that in very limited cases, but we do it. We also provide construction financing, which is often almost as high risk as the pre-development. And then we provide the permanent financing. We fund the mortgages. So we do all of it, but we partner. We also use mostly federal and state programs. We'll purchase bonds. We'll work with a developer and with the city to have a bond issued by HDC for the project so that or we'll use HUD programs. I think there's a lot of question marks about what's going to happen at the national level right now, obviously. But yeah, we usually partner with other other funders.
Are you involved with any, not only new conversion, but with new buildings, but the conversion of office buildings to residential? Have you been approached for that task?
Great question. We have been approached, and these things are coming up more and more often. I'd have to check our records to see. We have done adaptive reuse, and we have projects in the pipeline that are adaptive reuse. Those projects can be challenging, but there's a lot of potential, and it seems like there's gonna be a lot more of that happening. And are you seeing a lot of that happening in your district?
Can you fill us in our area here? There's a lot of empty office space, and there's a lot of talk about conversion. And I'm wondering if you guys are making it easier for that to happen.
We're always interested in talking to developers who want to do that or building owners who are thinking of that. The state unfortunately created a tax break for conversions that does not require labor standards on construction labor. And so, it's very difficult when you're kind of competing in an industry and there's this low road that employers can go where they could pay workers $15 an hour cash. And, when they do that, it's not like they're like, oh, we saved so much money on labor. Let's do a few more affordable units. No, they put that money in their pockets, of course. So we have a high road model where everything is done by the book, on the books. where we need help is with folks making sure that we uphold the legal floor that exists in many cases.
Yeah, so you're, I think the policy director, right? Or is there any policy coming up or something where we could support? Do you see anything changing in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested, our partners have been supporting a piece of legislation called the Jobs and Housing Act. State Senator Jessica Ramos is supporting it. It provides subsidy to it provides in its current form $1 billion of subsidy, which sounds like a lot of money in the scope of a $200 billion state budget. Not, and in terms of what it costs to develop housing, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's enough for a pilot. We're thinking of it as a pilot where let's create a pool of funds that can help developers who want to do things the right way, hire union labor, and build affordable housing. And so there are conditions attached to the money of broad bands of affordability from very low income to workforce housing. There's a requirement to use union labor. We're looking for support for that. And if that's something I could send you by email legislation, or if you're interested in hosting, one of the legislators has been working on it. I'm sure they'd be happy to join one of your meetings coming up. But yeah, that would be hugely helpful. It's called the Jobs and Housing Act.
Sure, Eric, great. Definitely send across the information. We can't formally take a position on that at this meeting, obviously, but we can take a look at it.
Understandable.
Any other questions for Eric? Okay, well, seeing none, Eric, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us. It was very informative.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for doing everything you do, serving the city of New York. Looking forward to being in touch. Take care.
Okay, so that concludes our formal agenda for this evening. We'll open the floor for new business, if any. Please raise your hand. Yes. Mike
I
Kavak.
just wanted to report that I will be doing a free tour of the Garment District, a lot of history, a lot of behind the scenes information, and that would be on a weekday. I think I'll give you the date in a second. That is not my strong point. The tour guide, that's interesting, but that would be on February 4th, 10:30 at the button, the yellow button. Anybody not know where the yellow button is? Okay, you can stay on the committee or.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else? Anything? Okay, see none, so I'll go ahead and share that draft letter with the group. We've got a bit of time until exec, not next week, usually, so we'll be open to feedback. But thanks all for taking the time to join us today. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tristan.
Mike, what's the agenda for tomorrow's meeting?
Julie, what's the agenda for the annual tomorrow? He's the vice chair.
It comes out to